I'd like to welcome you to NSC 305, Human Behavior in Health and Illness. This is the first study session of the module, and it deals with the basic concepts of human behavior. The human mind is contradictory in nature, which makes human behavior a complex topic to explore. People are both intellectual and emotional, and while human achievement is derived from the people's intellectual capacity, love remains a necessity for satisfaction in life. Although some persons have the capacity to care about others and even make great sacrifices for them, some other persons can be selfish, power-hungry, and downright mean to each other. In this study session, you will be introduced to the concept of human behavior, its principles, as well as its features. When you have studied this session, you should be able to describe the principles and features of human behavior, explain the concept of human behavior, and finally discuss social behavior in humans. Human behavior. Behavior is generally viewed as an external change or activity exhibited by an organism. It is the manner in which something functions or operates, as well as the actions or reactions of a person, an animal, or even a plant in response to a particular situation. This definition points to the fact that plants, as well as animals, display behavioral patterns which can be observed and measured. Human behavior could therefore be broadly defined as a manner of acting or controlling oneself. It could be viewed as observable demonstration of capability, skill, or characteristics, in that it is a set of actions that presumably can be observed, taught, learned, and measured. Principles of human behavior. The following are the basic principles that generally guide human behavior. 1. Stimulus and response. A stimulus is any phenomenon that directly influences the activity or growth of a living organism. Chemicals, heat, light, pressure, gravity, and environmental changes can all serve as stimuli. In some cases, an external environment can act as a stimulus. All creatures, without the exception of humans, are capable of automatic responses to stimuli. For example, when a person inhales something to which he or she is allergic, a sneeze follows. The person may suppress the sneeze, but this does not stop the body from responding automatically to the irritating stimulus by initiating a sneeze. Number 2 is innate and learned behavior. In general, behavior can be categorized as either innate, that is inborn, or learned, but the distinction is frequently unclear. In many cases, it is said that a behavior present at birth is innate, but this does not mean that a behavior that manifests later in life is learned. Behavior is considered innate when it is present and complete without any experience. Number 3 is reflex behavior. An excellent example of an innate animal behavior, and one in which humans also partake, is the reflex behavior. A reflex is a simple, inborn automatic response to a stimulus by a part of the organism. The simplest model of reflex action involves a receptor, a sensory neuron, and an effector organ. More complex reflexes require processing interneurons between the sensory and motor neurons, as well as specialized receptors. And lastly, we have behaviorism and conditioning. This school of thought had its roots in the late 19th century with the writings of a number of philosophers and psychologists, such as Ivan Pavlov, the Russian psychologist who showed by experiments that an animal could be trained to respond to a particular stimulus, even when that stimulus is removed, so long as the stimulus has been associated with a secondary one. Other experiments of this type demonstrated that an innate behavior can be modified, and this battered the scientific concept of conditioning or learning by association with a particular stimuli. Features of human behavior. Human behavior could present the following features. 1. Verbal expression, meaning that human behavior requires a language to express feelings and emotions. Non-verbal expression, which depicts human behaviors that are independent of a formal language. Then we have the conscious state, that refers to a state of being aware of a stimulus or event. The unconscious state is the opposite of consciousness. Here, a person is unaware of a stimulus or event. Interestingly, certain body languages that people exhibit could be categorized here. For example, tapping the foot, biting the finger, and even sweating. We have overt behavior. This form of human behavior is open, observable, and possibly measured. This form of human behavior is open, observable, and can be possibly measured. Good examples are a child crying when in need or a sick person engaging in certain health habits to feel better. We have the covert behavior. Here, behavior is closed, hidden, and not readily observable. Certain cultural practices could trigger this type of behavioral pattern. A very interesting example is the belief that men are generally not supposed to cry because they are the stronger sex, but are expected to be brave and bear grief, though they may cry in the safety of their homes. Another feature is the voluntary action. Here, behavior is performed willingly and not forced. For example, a student must be willing to learn. When forced, he could become a dropout or involved in exam malpractices. We also have involuntary actions, which refers to actions or behaviors performed suddenly without an ability to be controlled. Then the normal behavior refers to typical, expected, or ordinary activities that generally conform to a given norm and dictate of a society. For example, it is normal for a child to cry incessantly or generally behave like a child, but such behavior could be frowned at when exhibited by an adult. Lastly, we have the abnormal behavior, which refers to those activities that are different from the usual or expected. Thus, they are seen as a deviation from the norm. Concept of human behavior. In spite of all human beings being different and unique, there are considerable amount of common traits in all humans. On the basis of these traits, a number of psychologists have developed some important concepts about human behavior to give a better perspective to understanding the human nature. Number one, human beings are biological creatures, as they are influenced greatly by their biological makeup. Our biological makeup has a great influence on our lives. It sets limits on our behavior, but still we can influence our biological makeup to a certain extent. For example, by exercising regularly to build strong muscles. Number two, every person is different, yet much the same. All human beings are unique and different from others in terms of heredity and other characteristics. However, we all have the capacity to think, feel, and remember things, although in different extents. Number three, culture, ethnic identity, and gender identity helps to understand people. Culture molds our values, beliefs, likes, and dislikes. It has a powerful influence on human lives and behavior as a whole, and it shapes our personalities to certain extent. Another concept is that human life is a continuous process. The human life always undergoes the process of change. These changes occur through every stage of our lives and continues till death. They are not only physical, but can also be mental changes in areas of our feelings, understanding, and emotion. Another concept is that behavior can be adaptive or maladaptive. Human beings have the ability to adapt to their environment both physically as well as socially. The dynamic nature of human beings often help them to adapt to their environment in an adaptive manner. However, the maladaptive behavior that an individual shows is capable of change and correction at all times. And we also have that behavior is motivated. This is done mainly by two important factors, which are the internal and external factors. Basic motives such as hunger, pain, diseases, and so on are common in all human beings, although their intensity differs. Last of all, we have the concept that people play active part in creating their experiences. Human beings have the potential to create their own environment and experiences to satisfy their needs and desires. Thus, they do not accept an environment passively, but they play active part in determining what kind of experiences they will have and seek out particular situations that will help them to achieve such experiences. Human social behavior. Social behavior is a term used to describe the general conduct exhibited by individuals within a group or society. It is essentially in response to what is deemed acceptable by a person's peer group or involves avoiding behavior that is characterized as unacceptable. Hence, human behavior primarily determines how individuals interact with one another within a group or society. The different types of social behavior includes 1. Emotional behavior, which is a form of social behavior that generally causes individuals to behave emotionally. It could be in form of excitement, fear, joy, anger, or even sorrow. Then we have violent and aggressive behavior, which commonly happens in a crowd or group and occurs when certain individuals within a group act violently or aggressively and others copy the behavior. It is common during instances of looting and rioting. We have group action, which is a social behavior that occurs when people gather in a large crowd and attempt to change a particular aspect of the society. Group action usually have a particular purpose which influences behaviors both negatively and positively. And last of all, we have prosocial behavior, which is the social behavior that is viewed as altruistic. This type of behavior has to do with helping others through selfless actions. For instance, prosocial behavior occurs when an individual helps another without expecting an action in return. We've come to the end of this study session. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next class.